than today? Like a bus driver today, do they make more or less than 30 years ago? Right, exactly. So let me ask you this. When would you prefer to have that $100,000 debt? In 30 years ago, dollars?
30 years ago.
Or today's dollars? When would you prefer to have that debt?
30 years ago.
So let's pull the room. How many of you would prefer to have, $100,000 in the dollar value of 30 years ago? Okay. How many of you would rather have the debt in today's dollars? Okay, who's confused? That's okay. So let me explain.
Time value of money.
Let me explain. 30 years ago, if you had a $100,000 debt and you were making the income that you were making 30 years ago, would that be easier or harder to pay $100,000 in debt today? Yeah, how many of you think that it would be harder to pay $100,000 off 30 years ago compared to today? Say, oh yeah. All right, who doesn't agree with that? You think it's harder to pay off today? Are you working 30 years ago? I'm just asking. Do you think 30 years ago it was easier to pay $100,000 off? Yeah, 30 years ago it was harder. Okay, and now it's easy. Because it's easier to come across $100,000 today than it was 30 years ago. Yes or no? Yes. Right? A lot of people make 100 grand. Heck, I meet some people and I'm like, you made 100 grand? Right? Not here, but I mean like, just people out there. I'm like, wow, they pay you 100 grand, huh? Okay. Wow, salaries have really gone up. And it's interesting because the reason for that is that as time goes on, things get more expensive, right? And if you think about from a macroeconomic standpoint and the situation that we're in as far as the country, you have to think about, okay, how are we going to pay for the debt that we've gotten ourselves into, right? From a country perspective. And if you don't know kind of how much debt we've gone into, I want to show you. We're going to pull a website called the USDebtClock.org. Who's been on this site? Who has not yet been on this site? Okay, so we're going to pull it up, and I'm going to show you guys kind of how to read this. So Travis, if you don't mind, we can throw up the US Debt Clock. We can zoom into the top left there. Can we focus this projector a little bit better? I don't know if it's a little bit out of focus or not. Does it seem a little bit out of focus to you guys?
Got it.
He's got it. All right, so this is the U.S. national debt, top left here. So I'm going to show you guys how to read this. So, that's better. Thank you, Travis. $19.8 trillion. So is that billion or trillion? Trillion. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, I didn't hear the word trillions a lot. I heard millions and billions, but trillions kind of never came up. When I was in grammar school, it came up one time. This little kid came up to me, and he was like, you owe me a gazillion, billion, trillion dollars. That's the only time while I was in school that I think I ever heard $1 trillion. Now, trillions of dollars are kind of thrown around like it's no big deal. So let's put in perspective of what $1 trillion is. And guys, if your name pops up on here, please check in with Brandon. We're still doing interviews. Tracy, Victoria, Steve, and Michael D'Amato. So, how much is $1 million? So, if 1,000 people lined up and gave you $1,000 each, you have $1 million. 1,000 times 1,000 is $1 million. What's $1 billion? If 1,000 millionaires lined up and they each gave you $1 million, right? You would have $1 billion. It's 1,000 millions. So what is $1 trillion? $1 trillion. It's if 1,000 billionaires lined up and each gave you $1 billion each. 1 billion each.
1 trillion.
1,000 times a billion is $1 trillion. $1 trillion. We have $19.8 trillion worth of debt. Now, I don't know if you know but there are 0 trillionaires in the world. Nobody has accumulated $1 trillion yet. Now, do you guys know how many billionaires there is? Just take a guess, how many billionaires? Just yell it out. 250, 700, 5,000, 10. I'm not a billionaire, I know. A billionaire, 1,000 million. Do you guys want to know how many there is according to Forbes? No, in the world. I said the world. Did I say the world? Yeah, the world. Do you guys want to know how many? 1,810 billionaires in the entire world. Now look, if you took all their money, and you added it up together, everything that they're worth, every car that they have, every house that they have, every business, asset, everything, it's $6.1 trillion. If you add up all of the richest people's money in the whole world, 1,810 billion, all their money is $6.1 trillion. 6.1 trillion. Our debt is 19.8 trillion. So I want you guys to understand, if all the richest people in the entire world came to the U.S. and were like, hey, we want to help you out, or, you know, we're kind of struggling right now, here's our money, and the richest people in the world gave all their money to the U.S., the U.S. would look back at them and go, you gotta do more. Because we still need another 13 trillion, it's not year 6, just to pay off our debt. Now, to put things in perspective, see, history puts things in perspective. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in time. On this website, it's pretty unique, and anybody can go on it, USDebtClock.org, right? We can go back in time. So if we scroll over to the right, Travis, and we click on a tab, if you don't mind zooming out, and then click on the tab US, perfect. So let's show them how to do it. To the right, there's a tab right over there, and it says Debt Clock Time Machine. There you go. You guys see that? And go back in time, and let's go back to 2004. Click on 2004. And our debt in 2004 was 7 trillion. Today, our debt was 7.3 trillion. Today. That's why it's still clicking. Does that make sense? Okay, so now 13 years later in 2017, right, 13 years later, we're at close to 20 trillion, 19.8 trillion. So click on USDebtClock.org for me. Travis, click on the USDebtClock.org. Now it's 19.8. So we've gotten into about $13 trillion of more debt, additional debt, in 13 years. So that's about $1 trillion a year, which is very significant. Meaning all the way up until 2004, we had 7 trillion. Now from 2004 to 2017, we've almost tripled the debt in a little bit over a decade. Now, I don't know about you, but because of this debt going up, the people that I know, their lives didn't get much better. Like, meaning that debt, where did it go? Did it benefit you? Like, typically when government spends more money, people should have more benefits. And people should be better off. But unfortunately, that's not the case for most people. There's just 13 trillion extra dollars. Now let's look at our demographics. Our U.S. population, we zoom in to the right over here. Sorry, Travis, right over here. Our U.S. population is 324.9 million. Our U.S. workforce is 153 million. And our U.S. income taxpayers are 120 million. So we have 154 million people, 153 million people working, and only 120 million people paying taxes. Tomorrow you'll find out why. If we go all the way down, we go total receiving benefits in the United States of America, 163 million people. There's only 120 million people paying taxes, but there's 163 million people receiving benefits. So there's more people receiving benefits than people contributing to taxes.
Wow, that's deep.
Or working, you're right, because it's 150 million. Yeah, 153 million people working, 163, 10 more million people receiving benefits than people working. Look, there's 42 million people on food stamps.
Wow.
There's 20 million people in New York. Right? In the whole state of New York, there's like 20 million people. That's like 2 New Yorks being on food stamps. It's like New York and California being on food stamps. All of New York and all of California being on food stamps. That's a lot of people. Means a lot of things. Without insurance, 31 million people. Now look, based on this, we have $19.8 million worth of debt. That's just our national debt. So it's not just the debt that we've gone into as a country, it's also the promises that we've made to American people. So if you go to the left, right here, this is our U.S. unfunded liabilities. One of them being Social Security, another one being Medicare. $105 trillion. That's trillion, not billion. $105 trillion of unfunded liabilities. That's a liability that the government eventually is going to have to pay, but they do not have any funding for it. It's unfunded. That's why it says unfunded liability. So it's not just the $19.8 trillion of debt that we're in, it's also the almost $6 trillion of unfunded liabilities that we have. Now, based on this, we have over $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities that we have no idea how we're going to pay for. We have close to $20 trillion of debt, and we have a deficit. So if we go up to the left, over here, look, this is our revenue right here. Tax revenue is $3.3 trillion. That's how the government makes money, right? They charge us taxes. Our spending is $3.9 trillion. So we're spending $592 billion more than we're going to make this year. We're in a massive amount of debt, almost tripled it in a little bit over a decade, and we have another $106 trillion of unfunded liabilities. There's more people living off the government than people paying taxes, and there's more people retiring over the next 10 years than people entering the workforce. So, based on these demographics and this information, would you guesstimate that taxes will go down in the future or go up in the future? I mean, even with the taxes that they're charging right now, we don't pay our bills. So is this sustainable?
No.
Probably not. So do you think all these people that are living off the government, do you think that they're all going to be able to live off the government forever? No, because at some point they have to cut something, right? And, you know, obviously they can increase taxes, they can do this. But one of the ways that a lot of people don't talk about and don't understand from a macroeconomic level on how we're going to pay for this debt is something called inflation. Something called what? Inflation. So let me explain. Remember I gave you the example of having a $100,000 mortgage 30 years ago? And it was interest-only payment, so we have $100,000 today. And you can decide, should I pay off the $100,000 debt 30 years ago, or is it easier to pay the debt today? And the answer is the debt is easier to pay today. Why? Because the cost of living has gone up, and when the cost of living goes up, people demand to make more income, and when you make more income, it's easier to pay down the same dollar number than it was before when you were making less money. If you're making more money, it's easier to pay down $100,000 than if you're making less money. Would you guys all agree with that? Yeah. Meaning $100,000, is it worth less or more today than it was 30 years ago? Right now it's worth less. So when do you want to pay debt down? When it's worth more or when it's worth less? So let me ask you a question. Isn't it true that if you push debt into the future, right? You had a $100,000 debt 30 years ago. If you push that debt into the future, it's easier to actually pay for it in the future than it is back then. Yeah, if the cost of living goes up and people start making more money, it gets easier to pay. Let me give you another example of this if you're not understanding kind of where we're going with this message. If you don't mind giving me my screen back real quick. Thank you so much. Let's say somebody's making $50,000 right now, okay? They're making $50,000. and they get charged 20% in taxes. They pay $10,000 to the IRS. Does everybody understand that? 20% of 50 grand? Okay, now let's say this person, their rent goes up, a gallon of milk goes up, food goes up, gas goes up, energy bills go up, clothing, when you go to the store, goes up, to go to the movie theater, it goes up, everything goes up. This person at a certain point is not going to be satisfied with only making 50 grand. Would you guys agree with that? Right? If everything doubles, they're probably going to want to double their income over time. Yes or no? Now, it's not going to happen right away, like from one day to another. But let's give you a dramatic example just for educational purposes. Can I do that? So here's a dramatic example. Donald Trump goes on TV and he goes, executive order already passed, already talked to everybody. This is mandated. Everybody that's making 50 grand, now you're making 100 grand. Now, all your expenses that you have, now they're also double. The only thing that doesn't change is the debt amount. So if you had a $10,000 debt, you still have a $10,000 debt. But if your rent is $2,000 a month over here, now it's $4,000 a month. Now, let's say you're paying 20% over here, which you would pay more because the higher income you make, the higher tax bracket, right? But let's just say 20%. So you would get 20 grand. Right? Not you, sorry. The IRS would get 20 grand. Instead of 10 grand, they would get 20. So what do you think is easier to pay $20 trillion of debt down with? 10,000 per person or 20,000? 20. So if the government causes inflation to happen and people are demanding more money, when they demand more money, they end up in a higher tax bracket and they end up paying higher taxes. And that's better for the government to pay down the debt versus this. In fact, if you just looked at this example versus this example, it gets twice as easy to pay the $20 trillion worth of debt if this were to happen. Meaning if the cost of living rose and people demanded more money and then they got it because they go on strikes or whatever the case is, right now they're talking about the minimum wage going up to $15, yeah? In some states it's already gone up to $15. How much is it right now here? 11. So it's gone up here, yes? In some states, it's like $8. Yes or no? Yes. Right? But they're still demanding for 15, 15, 15. That's fine. My point is, it's already happening right in front of us. Meaning, in order to pay down this huge amount of debt, one of the only ways to do it is through inflation. Because they can't triple the tax rate because people would go nuts. Like, imagine if they took 3 times the amount of money in taxes out of your check than they do right now. Would you be okay with that? Would you just sit back and be like, it's taxes, we gotta pay them? Would you do that? Or would you do something about it? What would you do? You would demand either for more money from your boss, yes or no, and say, I can't do this job anymore, right? Or you would quit and then go do something else. That'll make you more money, or you'll figure something else out, right? Because the IRS, you can't not pay your taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, what will happen? You'll have major problems. Right? Have major problems. Right? So, if they triple the tax rate though, that's going to be a lot different than if the cost of living goes up slowly for the next 10 years, for the next 5 or 6 years, and then everybody ends up making double. Now, if you think this is kind of out of the question, just think like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, where some people are making 50,000 a year, same position, 20 years ago they were making 25. Think about that. Salary 20 years ago. So I'll say it again. Some people are making 50 grand now. 20 years ago, that same position, is it possible that some of those people were making 25 years ago? 20 years ago was a gallon of milk a lot less money than it is now. How much was a gallon of milk in, I don't know, 1990s? Quarter. A quarter? Long back. How much? $1.25, $1.50. I don't remember. I don't remember. I'm asking. $1.38? $1.98, so $2. What's a gallon of milk now? $4 or $5. want healthy milk? It's $400. The point is, do things double over time? Now watch this, 20 years ago, piece of real estate in Brooklyn. Done well. So watch this. As the value, look, let's use a dramatic example, but it happens over 10 years, right? Trump doesn't go on TV and go, hey, everybody's doubling, your expenses are doubling. It just happens naturally over 20 years, okay? And over 20 years or 10 years or whatever the amount of years is, nobody really knows, at what time it's going to happen. Because we've gotten in so much debt, it's possible that it happens faster than historically. Right? So if everything is doubled in 20 years, it's possible because we've almost tripled our debt in a little over a decade, that things double in about a decade. Are you guys with me? So if things double in about a decade, that means from right now, the $500,000 properties, what is it possible that they're going to be worth? Why? Because people that are making $100,000 now, it's very possible that in 10 years, if everything doubles, they're making $200,000. Right, so if you're making $200,000 instead of $100,000, can you afford to buy a $2 million building instead of a $1 million building? A $2 million house instead of a $1 million house? Yeah. What about rents? If somebody was making $50,000 versus making $100,000, isn't it true that they can pay higher rents because they make more money? Yeah. You guys ought to understand when income goes up, the government gets more money, and everything else goes up, including your cost of living. But the good thing is that we have to understand here is, number one, the government will probably be in a better financial position when things go up. The only people that are going to be in a bad position are people that have, for example, this situation. Look, let's say you have $100,000 cash, and you leave it in the bank, and then everything doubles over the next 10 years, and you have $1,000. But everything doubled. Now you need $200,000 to buy the same stuff that you could have bought for $100,000, but you only have $100,000. Are you guys following? Right? So think about that for a second. Now, instead of just leaving it in the bank, what can we do with this money? Let's say we buy one house. We buy it cash. This house is now worth $200,000 in the future. Would you guys bet that it would go up to $200,000, yes or no? Right, in 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, right? But it will go up. If it's a buy and hold situation, great. Is it possible that it goes down sometime? But if it's cash flowing, are you okay? Yeah, you're not going to sell it when it goes down. Right? Why would you sell it when it's going down if your tenants are paying the mortgage? You wouldn't, right? Unless you had some sort of dire financial situation that you had to sell. So look, it goes up to $200,000. Now you have a house. You traded, you what? $100,000 for a house. And that house went up in value up to $200,000. Now everything that you could have bought for $100,000, it costs you $200,000. And you have $200,000 worth of assets. So did your life get better? Your financial situation get better, worse, or stayed the same? Who thinks better? Who thinks worse? Who thinks it stayed the same? Who's not going to answer because you know you're not going to be right? So look. If I kept $100,000 cash in the bank, would I lose if I left it? Okay, great. We're all understanding. Okay. Saving, sometimes you lose money. Does that make sense? As bad as that sounds, like saving is losing because we've been taught our whole lives to save. The reality of it is, right, that if things double and our money's not doubling at the same time, we're losing. Right? Financially, we're losing. Okay, good. So if we trade it for a house and the house does go up to $200,000, if I sold the house and I had $200,000, right, then I could buy the same things that I could have bought for $100,000, 10 years ago. So I can buy the same exact things that I could have bought 10 years ago. So I basically saved the what? That's called preserving your capital. That's called what? Meaning the value of your dollar, you traded your dollars for a piece of real estate. The piece of real estate went up as the value of the dollar went down. That's called shorting the dollar. You bet against the dollar when you buy real estate because as real estate goes up, the dollar goes down. And as the dollar goes down, real estate goes up. Because you need more dollars to buy the same piece of real estate. That means that you have less purchasing power with that dollar. Therefore, that dollar is worth less. That's why a lot of people put their money in real estate. The people that understand economies and macroeconomics and very rich people, they buy real estate. Why? Because, I don't know if you guys have heard, a lot of hedge funds in the last 5 years have purchased a lot of foreclosures and a lot of real estate, and they're just holding it.
Yep.
Who's heard of that? Who's heard that hedge funds are buying a lot of property?
Yep.
Why do you think they're buying a lot of property? Right, because they understand it's a short against the dollar. Right? When you buy real estate, it's a short against the dollar, meaning you're betting against the dollar, right? You're betting against the dollar's value. If you believe that the value of the dollar is going to go down, like I do, right? And you invest in real estate's going to go up as the value of the dollar goes down. Could there be ups and downs across the way? Yeah, but it doesn't really matter because if your cash flowing, you never have to sell. Okay, so with this, instead of buying one house cash and kind of being equal and just having the same, what if we took our 100 grand and we didn't buy one house? How many houses could we buy based on the example that was given? Right, so we buy 4 houses and we put $25,000 down on each house. And now they're each worth $200,000 in 10 years or whatever the case. So now how much value of real estate do we have? Now we have mortgages, right? We had 75, that'd be 150, plus another 150, that's 300. But over 10 years, let's say we paid it down a little bit, so we owed only 250. So now we have value of 550, not what? Now we have value of what? Not what? What would you prefer, 200 or 550? Right, so we traded the same amount, right? You traded 100,000 now, 200,000 in assets. Here you traded 100,000 to have an additional 550 in assets. And throughout the whole time, you made more cash flow, you had more write-offs. And if the value of these went down to 50 at some point, it doesn't matter because you didn't sell them, you waited. Why would you sell them if they're all cash? You wouldn't, right? So this doesn't even matter. The ups and downs of the market don't really matter. In fact, when the market drops, values go down. And when values go down, right, it's because there's not a lot of buyers, so a lot of buyers aren't in the marketplace, so a lot of people have to rent, so your rents go up. And not only that, then you appeal your property taxes, and your cash flow goes up. You're allowed to appeal your property taxes. When they're charging you a value of X, and now the value is lower, you can appeal it, and then they lower your taxes. 2015, I appealed a bunch of properties, $19,000 off my property taxes. If I wouldn't have appealed it, I wouldn't have got it. But you have to do it, you have to understand how things work. Right? It's because I bought them low and the town had it assessed at a very high amount. And I was like, look, I bought them for this. The tax assessor came out, they lowered all my property taxes, $19,000 off just for that 1 week. Fortune builders taught me how to do that. So, just keep that in mind that the idea of this is this. Like, if you have $100,000 and you're all about saving money and leaving it in the bank, you might want to reconsider that. Because the only way that we're going to be able to pay for the debt that we're in our country is with two things. Tax rates going what? And inflation. And what do you think is going to be a more smoother transition for the American people? Inflation, because most people don't balk when they go to the supermarket and there's 16 ounces in that $4 box of cereal when there used to be 32. They just pick it up and they go, oh, this is lighter, and they put it in the supermarket shopping cart. And they just go about their day and they do it and that's it. But if they would have doubled your taxes, see, it's easier to double your cost of living and then you demand on your employers to ask for more money than to double your tax rate. But guess what? It's almost the same thing. Because they're just letting you do the work. And that's okay. Because if you're an investor and you're a landlord and you own a lot of real estate, guess what? Your money's going to go up a lot. Meaning your equity, your net worth is going to go up a lot. How many of you want to own a lot of real estate when things double? Just by show of hands, let me see. Say it again. When's the last time rents have gone down? Give me the last year in your neighborhood that you live in that rents have gone down. Rents keep going what? Up, and people keep demanding more money and demanding more money and demanding more money, and they get more money, and this happens and that happens, and everything. Look, if I go to my job and I go, hey, I need more money to the boss. And all the other employees go, oh, we want more money, or we're leaving, And then they give them more money. What are they going to do with their profits? Are they going to keep them at the same price? What are they going to do? They're going to raise the price. And if they raise the price, what happens to all the other people buying the products? They go to their employers and they go, look, everything's more money. I want everything to go up. I need more money. And then what happens when they go to their employer and they ask for more money? Then they raise the price. And then what happens? All the people buying that product, what do? They go, look, everything is more expensive. I need more money. And when everybody makes more money, what does that mean? That they pay higher taxes. And it's easier to pay the same debt. The same what? The same $20 trillion debt. It's easier to pay for that if they're charging people $20,000 per person versus $10,000 per person. But the reality of it is that they're not going to charge them $20,000 per person. They're going to charge them more because their tax bracket is going to go higher. So you can either win or you can lose, but that's up to you. I'm going to win. I'm going to win because I own a lot of real estate. And as inflation happens, because of the cost of living going up, and real estate goes up, I'm going to take advantage of it because I'm going to own a lot of it. You don't, look, if you're a renter and you stay as a renter over the next 10 years, you're going to lose. And you're always going to be at the mercy of your employer. Always.